Well, welcome to another episode of Rapidly Aging Technology. Today we're doing a new computer build, something very special, I'd say. I usually say something along those lines whenever we do anything that's any special interesting, but I think you will agree that this one is. Because, as the thumbnail or title may have alluded to, we're using a special processor. We are using two of these guys. Now, these are the Xeon equivalent of the Intel Pentium Extreme Edition 965, which was a Pentium D, or you could say a dual-core Pentium 4, that ran at 3.733 gigahertz, 4 megabytes of level 2 cache, and on the 1066 bus, and it had hyper-threading. Now, the Extreme Edition on the consumer side definitely allowed for overclocking. I suspect that the Intel 5080 Xeon, which is what these are, does not. But if this works out, we will have 4 cores and 8 threads of Pentium 4 power, running at one of the higher clock speeds that were available for this architecture. The highest they ever got was 3.8 as far as what was publicly released. There was a rumor that they were going to release a Pentium 4 at 4 gigahertz, but then they stopped. I think they could have done it, but it probably would have been even hotter. So those are the chips we're using, which will be it was going to be a heat machine, quite frankly. And here is the case. This is a Lee & Lee design, which usually I don't splurge out on something like this, but this is a very special machine. So what's the point of this machine, and why did I get an all aluminum case? Which, by the way, this is my style of case. It's very simple. It's kind of old-fashioned, though it needs more drive bays and definitely some 3.5-inch bays. It's because in past videos I've alluded to the Dell XPS as being the Dell equivalent of the PowerMac G5. It has a weird form factor as far as motherboard and insides, exotic cooling, 4 cores, big aluminum case designed for airflow, that sort of thing. Well, this I'm trying to make the a more legitimate comparison. So using the peak of Pentium 4 NetBurst technology versus peak G5 technology, a workstation class motherboard, 2 dual core processors, that sort of thing. I think it'll be a fairer comparison, and they're both known for their heat. So this will be something fun, I think. Now, because it's going to probably be loud, because this is a server workstation motherboard, and so are the cooling units for it, I have some of this stuff from Silverstone. It's basically foam padding, which we are going to prepare the case with, so that this thing doesn't make as much noise as I expect it might. So that's what we're going to start with. Now, I know you folks did not come here just to see a couple chips and see some foam added into a computer tower, even though it's a nice computer tower, to make it more soundproof. So let's go over the other components that are going to make their way into this build, even if it's not all in this video. For hard drive, we have Western Digital Gold 1 terabyte. I think I originally was going for a 2 terabyte, but didn't, which would match the size of the main drive in the G5, which is a 2 terabyte black. The gold drives, as you may have heard, are being discontinued by Western Digital because the Hitachi division, which they purchased, is a much more well-known brand within the server environment. So they are going to basically stick with those, but Western Digital manufactures them. So if you like the Western Digital Gold, look at the Hitachi or AGST drives. They make them, I think, they might be even in facilities that Hitachi owns, because I thought I heard there's sometimes a little bit higher quality coming out of the Hitachi branded ones, but either way, if you like the gold, there's a Hitachi equivalent, so that's good. For a motherboard, we have a Tian this brand of motherboard, which they're well known within the server and workstation environment. They are a good brand, and they were built in the US for a long time. I'm not sure if they still are. This is one of their Tempest boards, or this board, excuse me for having to grab it. Let's see here. As you can see, it has 2 chips already in there. These are 2 gigahertz Core 2 era chips, which are technically faster, but they're not as fun. So out they go. The reason I picked this motherboard was that it wasn't super expensive. It could take the chips I wanted to use, which are these Intel Extreme Editions, and it has a PCIe 16X slot, which a lot of workstation boards did not when I was looking. So that's great. Let's see, can I find the name of this particular board somewhere? I know it. It's like a Tempest 5000X or something. I'll confirm and probably put it on the screen here, because it's a very full board. There's not a lot of room for written things, which adds to the problem that we're going to run into. So down here, you can probably see that FP. This is where in the manual the front panel connector is. It's not there. Actually, all these connectors down here are no longer there. They appear to have moved up at the top by the power connectors. As you can see, there's another FP there for a front panel buried beneath by the capacitor. This doesn't match up with what's in the manual. Neither of these connectors really do. So it's going to be a bit of a mystery. I'm probably going to have to do the old take a screwdriver and tap around to turn it on and use that as a reference point. It gives me the pin numbers, but there's too many pins. There's too many key slots. This one doesn't match up. It's going to be a little bit of a mystery here. For back of the motherboard, we have a very basic layout. However, for one reason or another, they didn't go with like a traditional spacing, so I couldn't find a proper back pane for it. I got a generic, which kind of has the traditional locations for things, and this lines up, this lines up, this lines up. It starts to fall apart down here because the audio connectors are just a little askew, and this is just a little askew. Plus, this is designed for 2 Ethernet ports. We really need a bigger one for USB. But yeah, so theoretically, I could use this back pane if I could somehow cut out this chunk here and just slap it in, and it'd be fine. So this is gonna be my first build without actually having a back bracket here. So take that as you will. For graphics card, we are putting in an AMD card, which should be working, hopefully, of an XFX RX or R7970. So this uses the same GCN type architecture that the current cards are using, only an older version. Dang, this is heavy. It's got a lot of aluminum on here, which means its driver support should be pretty dang decent. I've got cooling pipes and all sorts of hoopla. So this should be a very happy card as long as it works. So I'm quite happy with that. So what are we using for cooling? Well, it would be these monsters. These are Intel official coolers for this socket. Notice that this is a thick copper base plate, all copper fins, and a decent sized fan pushing down there. Just massive things. I expect this to have the potential to be a screamer, which is why I'm taking all the precautions to keep the noise level down. But yeah, 2 of these, and they have to have additional back plates I got for them. So we'll be having to get those mounted and whatnot. So hopefully this motherboard and everything works. Nothing's tested, so you'll be learning with me. So now let's get down to this case. We're going to take it apart and put some padding in. Now, I eventually am probably going to add in some side pans, so I'm going to try to leave this area blank. And there's a room for an extra spot in the front for a fan. So we will do that at some point too. I want to switch out the fans from Noctua fans, assuming this build works out. If it doesn't, let's say the motherboard, I just can't get this machine to work, or the front panel connector remains a mystery, I do have a backup. And it will be an AMD based system. So, an exciting possibility if this doesn't work. So let's go. So I've cracked the first side panel off, and we have a nice thank you. They want you to post pictures of your build on Facebook and whatnot. And a manual full of manual things. And we also have a box of price screws and whatnot, so we're going to rip all this out. Oh, that's convenient. So their fan is a 3-connector fan, but they also gave you a Molex adapter just in case. Not one for this one though. That's okay. I do like the that it has a metal grill. It's nice, and then some sort of toolless caddy system. So I'm going to pull that out. I was thinking of putting padding on the upper side, but I think it'll be fairly close for the motherboard, so I think I will skip that, mainly focusing on the sides. Yeah, I think I'll probably skip that. So I just cracked open the little white box. It has all the screws, and it has an extra computer speaker, little beeper guy, and some other little doodads, which is fine. And then it's got this, a USB connector that converts to this pinout, which is interesting. And now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, this is a conversion to, in case you don't have any USB 3, it converts it over so you can use the USB 3 connector for the chassis onto a USB 2.0 motherboard. That's handy. I'm glad they thought of that. So anyway, we're going to take the other panel off, and we're going to put down the sound dampening material. All right, so let's start with the kind of the backside panel. And here's what the material looks like. Now this, it's very dense and rubbery, and it also has a pattern to it. There's a three-dimensional depth to it, a deep texture. This is the second version of their soundproofing foam. The first version was thinner and flat, so it was just kind of sheer muffling. However, this kind, with that pattern cut into it, should disrupt sound waves even better. How much of a difference, who knows, but it should be something. Because while this is a Lee & case, it's fairly thin aluminum, so we want to try to knock out as much sound as possible. So if we take this and measure it out, leave you a little extra. Oh, look, 3M is out of hand in it. I should be able to cut a section out, and it should just work. Don't think I need to leave much space over here. The screws will go in just fine, I think. All right. Well, we'll see if this works. And I can't really draw straight lines. I can't really cut straight lines very well. So we'll see how this goes. Hey, that wasn't too bad. So now what I'll do is I'll trim this little corner just a little bit, and I'll try to place it more on this side so there is room for screws just in case that's a problem. There we go, finally got it. Back full of stickiness, and let's just put the straight side over here. Oh, there's some air bubbles in it. That's why those spots looked a little funny, but that's okay. All right. So with that on, I should be able to get right back on the case. And hopefully it'll run fairly quiet. All right, then we got that one in place. So that should do a little bit of something. Now let's do the other panel, which is going to require a little more cutting because we need to leave a blank space in it. All right, with that done, we're going to move on to prepping the motherboard, which is far more interesting, to be honest. No, the lines aren't straight, it doesn't look good, but it's going to be on the inside, no one can see it. So first things first, we want to get these heat sinks all prepared, and they come in, other than their outer plastic shell, they come with this extra cover, which is clipped on, which is interesting. And this is heavy. Just imagine the old brick of copper. Pull the tabs out, pop it on the ground. Okay, we'll get these cleaned up here. Using my usual Arctic silver stuff, we'll get this cleaned up, and then we'll get to the motherboard proper. There we go. You've seen me clean off heat sinks before, so nothing too crazy there. To the motherboard. All right, now to remove these likely superior CPUs. And oh, by the way, we do have official Dell heat-sinked server RAM. What is this? This should be DDR2. Let's pull these off. I don't remember the exact name of the socket, but I think it's, yeah, 771. It's basically the same as 775, but server. I know you're wincing a bit. There's technically a spot for my finger to go. There we go. Woo. There we go. Let's see. Can we get a look at that? You know, well, so there's one. It's the 5130, 2 gigahertz with 4 megabytes level 2 cache on the 1333 bus. So technically superior. And then you can line it up. There's 2 notches, and there's also the arrow. Notches are visible here and here, and then the arrow goes on the flat side. And we will, of course, be cleaning this off a bit. Just gonna set it in there. And everything is lined up. And ratchet down. Here we go. One in. So now, of course, the same. And another one in. You know, as much as I love the Extreme Edition 965, I'm kind of cursed when it comes to it. For those who aren't familiar with my channel, the first time I tried to use it was in my, I don't think I showcased this machine yet, my XP machine. And then when I did a BIOS update, it could no longer accept that processor. So I had to switch it out to something else, which is sad. A better processor, but still kind of sad that's what the fate of it. The other times I tried to use it would be in the Dell XPS machine, and one of them, I think I popped it in there, and I think I killed it from overclocking it, which is sad. But oh well, you know, everyone has to learn somewhere. You got to kill an old processor. So now it has a much better processor. It makes no sense to switch back. So I'm going to clean this off, and then we're going to try mounting these heat sinks, which is going to be a little wonky. All right, so what we're going to have to do is get these back plates on, just kind of slipped into place. Because as you can see on the heat sink, we have some captive screws here that will pop through. And on the back of this motherboard, it already has a little bit of a plate, but they're not plates that you screw into. They're just like guards. So more or less we'll be slipping them. I'm going to slip them under the guards with the little part of the nubbins up to keep them aligned, and we'll screw them down, and hopefully everything will work out. Server thing's weird. That one's in. So I suppose it would be best to try to just keep one plate in position at a time. So I've just slipped that under there and got the holes aligned as much as it will. So hopefully yeah, they're aligned. There's not a lot of meat there for it to really latch onto, but it's there. So now we will put down some thermal paste, and hopefully we can do this in one try so I don't have to re-clean things. Put down a decent little blob. That should be plenty. So I'll line it this way to give it some loop around over to the plug. Okay. Now we'll start screwing things in. Okay, that went. Well, it went somewhere. It went. It went somewhere. And that one went, and then we will okay, let's see how that did. Feels like something happened. So we got threads in all the different spots. The plate is lined up nicely. So I think that is a success. And I'll just get that guy plugged in. Yeah. Here we go. And we'll figure out the cables later. All right, number 2. Oh, these mounts are, well, they're actually not too bad. It's just with that extra floating bit, the floating silver bit behind the motherboard, it's kind of goofy. Okay, that feels good. There, and its plug is right here, so if I mount it there, I can wrap it around and not have too much flopping about. What did I just say? Oh, and they'll both be aligned and say Intel. Those are lined up to something. Okay, that one latched on. So far, these have been actually grabbing very easily. So I will applaud Intel on this parts of this design. That I didn't really have to struggle. Once I got everything aligned, which really wasn't too bad in and of itself. It really does seem to do a decent job. Now I'm sure in proper server environments there'd be some chassis that would let you screw that the chassis itself would mesh up to the motherboard, and these would actually locking into the chassis, but not in this case. We're also going to run into another thing that's going to require modification. in that. For standard ATX, there's certain locations where the screw holes are for the motherboard to mount onto the case. Well, because of how complex this motherboard is, some of those are missing, particularly along this area, which means I'm probably going to have to pull off the pre-mounted studs from the chassis in order to get this thing to mount in nice and happy. So I guess we'll figure out if we need to do that. I suspect we will. I'm also still annoyed and concerned about the front panel connector, getting that to work out right. Yeah, so there we go. Looking at the case, my gut reaction is to do the motherboard first before I do the power supply, just because of how wonky this is going to be, and then we'll do the rest. Now, I think this video has probably been long enough, so there will be multiple parts. So stay tuned for part 2 and potentially 3. Thanks for spending time with me here. Feel free to press the bell icon so you can get notifications when I post, because as you know, I'm not super regular, so I'm not going to fill your feed or anything. Subscribe, like the video, that sort of hoopla. Well, I will see you. Hopefully we will make this machine work. I really hope we do, because this is a really cool motherboard. And I mean, just look at all that. Don't forget to subscribe to the group Retro Machines on Facebook, because there you will find other folks who have the same interests as you, along with other creators who make much more better videos than mine there. So, you have a great day. Happy New Year. It's the new year now. Where'd the old one go? I don't know. And talk to you later. Bye.